Hi, everybody. My name is Josh Livney. I'm on the Maps Developer Relations team, and we have a guest here today, Peter Birch, works here as project manager for Earth API, and various related products. He's been here quite a while and has all the inside info on Earth. So I thought it'd be fun to start out today's hangout with just some questions, maybe about the early days of Google Earth. I think you joined back when it was version 4. Has come a long way from that. Maybe you can talk about some of those early days.
Yeah, sure. So I actually joined in 2006, and I actually came in just before the what was the first Geo Developer Day. I don't know if you remember that. But,
I was there.
Yes, that was sort of the precursor to what is now grown into Google I/O. But so I kind of jumped in right in the thick of it as we're starting to get the first version of Google Earth 4 out.
I think that's when we introduced super overlays, if I recall correctly.
That was, yeah, exactly.
I remember hacking on the little Python script to create some master super overlays. Those were the days. So things come a long way from there. Maybe you can mention some of the biggest changes that have happened in the last few years, the ones that really stuck out.
Yeah, certainly. So I mean, Earth has gone through this progression. So it started off as a Windows desktop app. We added Mac support in 3.1, I believe, which was before my time. We introduced Linux support. But since then, been a lot of big changes. So obviously, the introduction of the Earth API in 2008 was really, one big change in a way of kind of bringing that experience to the web and allowing, really creating another developer community in addition to what could be done with KML, being able to use JavaScript to control Earth. The other big change, obviously, is mobile. We launched, again in 2008, the iOS. So at the time was the first iPhone. Since then, we've added, obviously Android. We've added iPads and Android tablets. So there's been a lot. I mean, I think everyone's pretty aware there's just been tremendous growth in mobile, and that geo kind of things, whether it's maps or location information, is such an integral part of the mobile experience that it's really an exciting space for us. So we've been spending a lot of time kind of thinking about mobile as well.
Yeah, and I think it's the latest 6.2.2 version that has some new found abilities with KML and mobile. Maybe you just want to talk briefly a little bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, when we first came out with Earth on mobile, everyone's first question was, when can I have KML displaying on it? And I think that, what we knew at the time was that we're actually sharing a lot of the same code between these different devices, right? And but obviously, a mobile device is a more constrained environment, and so it took us some time, first of all, to expand onto multiple platforms and make sure we worked on tablets, and then there were some other just general things we needed to do to make sure that KML would work successfully. But we were really excited to finally be able to turn that on in 6.2 and have that available simultaneously on iOS devices and Android devices.
Yeah, it is really nice to be able to click a KML and have it load right up in the native application. And some pretty robust stories. Tours look great on the tablet devices. Look amazing.
Yeah, I was really really excited to get tours in there as well. I think it's really important to us to really support KML and the KML developers, because there's just so much KML out there that we really wanted to make it so that you didn't have to create this like mobile-only experience or some other kind of thing, so that basically if you have KML linked off of your page somewhere, you can click on that, download it, and view it.
Yep.
And I think that really just expands the existing community of geo developers and people who are using KML. Without having to create something that's kind of slightly different and new.
Yeah, and I love the way it sort of auto-recognizes if you have a tour in the KML, and then in your tablet or your phone, it kind of just brings up that play automatically. That's pretty intuitive.
Yeah, that's something we're actually experimenting with. In some ways, the mobile platform gives us a little bit more leeway to experiment, because there's not as much sort of past usage and expectations, so we were able to kind of play around with the things a little bit differently. So that was one of the things where we wanted to try that out and see if it would work. So the fact that you have a tour, we load it up, you immediately start playing it, may be an idea that we carry back over to the desktop, because I know that a lot of people who do tour development you end up with this kind of awkward double click here on the icon in the left-hand panel, not very intuitive for for users that aren't necessarily familiar with KML. So we're looking at ways of kind of making it an easier, more fluid experience for everyone.
Yeah, I love that latest. It's fun to play on my tablet for sure. But going back to something you said earlier about the Earth API, we had Paul Rademacher on a few weeks ago. I know he worked on the early API, but we didn't talk about that so much. Do you have any fun stories of kind of how that started? Anything interesting that the general public might not know about the early days of the Earth API?
Well, I think the fact that Paul worked on it is a pretty interesting, fun fact.
Because he kind of came from the Maps background. With
so I mean, he sort of was the guy who created Google Maps API in some ways, right? So basically, Google Maps was out there with his housing maps, basically hacked it in such a way that he actually started to mash up his own map. In this case, it was like Craigslist data with our maps.
Yep.
And so, we were really excited when he did join Google and really wanted to work on Earth API and bringing, the 3D experience in. He has a background in 3D graphics as well. So that was pretty cool. It was kind of like someone coming in who both had the 3D sort of animation experience and who's sort of one of the pioneers in creating a mashup as the driving, force behind getting the Earth API built.
Yeah, and we've seen a lot of adoption since then. So I guess it's just a couple more questions before we go to open-ended questions here from folks on our moderator. If you're not watching, if you are watching the live stream on YouTube, you're welcome to click the link in our Plus page to ask a moderator question. Otherwise, we'll go to some live questions for folks in the Hangout as well. So just a couple quick questions, like what's your favorite sort of app that you've seen recently that people have developed on the API?
So I'm a big fan, of course, of Paul Van Dinther's work on Planet in Action.
Beautiful stuff.
Always great to see what he's coming up with. And the most recent one, which is the ocean current animation, is just really stunning. It's actually based on some data that NOAA put together. So it's satellite-based, high-resolution time sequence imagery of currents. And like any great geodata, it gets even better when you actually put it on Google Earth, right?
Yep.
So being able to
really see those patterns globally.
And if you go to planetinaction.com, you can go in there and play with it yourself. Doing it on a Hangout probably won't do it justice to the experience, but it really is a great way of actually visualizing real scientific data, which is these sort of perpetual current patterns. Yeah. And you can actually fly around the Earth and kind of see them. You can see different eddies occurring. You can really start to understand, what marine navigation was like in the day when people are trying to figure out how do they get from one place to another. So
it's amazing.
I'm a sailor as well, right. So it's like it's always interesting kind of seeing how our planet's moving around and churning, and it's a great visualization of it.
It'd be interesting to overlay some ship tracks on top of those even today and see how much they take advantage of the different
it's a great idea.
currents. All right, next mashup. So, and what about some new data that we've added to Google Earth? I know we keep adding lots of different data all the time. What's some of your favorite sort of new data additions?
So probably my favorite one we've done recently is, as part of our historical imagery, we recently added, so I live in San Francisco, and we recently added 1938 San Francisco imagery, which is just fantastic. So the historical imagery feature in general has always been one of my favorite features that people don't necessarily know about, because there's just such a vast archive. We're always bringing in new imagery and we're laying it on top, and we're covering up a lot of what was there before. So the fact that when we introduced it in Earth 5, this ability to be able to kind of peel back and go back in time is tremendously powerful. Now we're starting to turn up these data sets, like this 1938. It's 1 meter resolution imagery of all of San Francisco. That's incredible. Incredibly high resolution, and you can, for those of you who know San Francisco, have been there, it's really fantastic. You can go and look at Crissy Field, which is now it's like a sort of park, a marine wetlands area that used to be an airstrip. So you can actually see it as an airstrip. You can see planes on it. You can see the hangars.
So much.
And it's funny, you can see what hasn't changed as well. So it's a great data set.
Yeah, definitely take advantage of the historical imagery when you're browsing on Google Earth, but also, if you're a developer, take advantage of that too. If you're telling a story that takes place over a period of time, you can programmatically disable and enable historical imagery and choose, what area you're looking at. So
yeah, and that's something we have in the Earth API today.
Yeah.
It's not something we have on mobile yet, but it's obviously something that we've thought about, because being able to bring that kind of experience to wherever you are, I think would be pretty powerful.
Yeah, it's amazing to see how the Earth changes. So we should probably move on to some live questions here. I'm going to go ahead. For those of you, I muted everybody who joined this office hours. Can you raise your hand if you have a question? I'll unmute you, and happy to answer any questions that we can here. All right, we have a question here from Don. Let me figure out how to unmute you. I think you're open.
I'm just curious about the future of Google Earth on mobile, and whether or not that's going to be a platform where developers and what we've been able to do with the Earth API are going to be able to do anything similar at all in terms of mobile.
Sure. So that's a great question. So the first part of that, I think, is with the 6.2 release, is really kind of the first step towards that, right? So prior to that, there was really no way for anyone to customize or put data on it. So we're starting by saying, use your existing KML, any data that you have, you can view that on a map. And there's really quite a lot you can do with that. So not only can you just take existing KML data, you also can use tours. So basically, if you have a tour in your data, you not only can have the data there, but you can have the whole visualization for it. And the fact that, as Josh mentioned, we'll go ahead and auto-launch the player. There's also another interesting little feature in there, which is we have something called a tour generator, where we will auto-generate a tour. And I think we need to get some documentation out for this on the dev site, because you can actually pass in an ID for a feature, and then Google Earth will auto-generate sort of the best tour it can based on that data. And we'll be talking some more about that later. We need to get some...
Yeah, a nice KML article on that. That's a great idea.
And in fact, we're using it in the MyTracks app right now. So if you go off and say, go for a bike ride, and then you want to say, hey, I want to view this, you can hit play. It will launch Earth. Earth will automatically generate a tour for it, and then we'll replay it. So that's step one, right? There's also kind of the next, is there going to be another stage where you can have a complete, full API control? And it's definitely something I'd like to see happen. We don't have anything to talk about right now. And we need to think about, what the right platform is. We have to think about, Android and iOS. So the JavaScript API, given the restrictions of plugins, means that there isn't a great story there right now. But I definitely see us moving in that direction in the long term.
Okay. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, thank you. Any other questions from folks here? Oh, yeah. Okay, we got one here, and then we'll hop over to our moderator. Let's see. Can we hear you, Jeremy?
It's a Street View question, actually.
Okay.
We have a site called The Best Driving Roads, and it's an interactive thing, and it's a KML overlaid on top of Google Maps. What are the chances of, at some point in the future, people want to drive along through Street View? So it will make things Street View images into a movie. So you could go along stage by stage by stage. It'd be a juddery movie, but it would flow you down a road.
It's an interesting idea. I think that, within the API, I don't know what things on the Maps API side people have done with sort of transitions from Street View image to Street View image. Certainly within Earth API, we already have the ability, at least some limited capabilities, of moving the camera, and Earth will sort of automatically update the
kind of interpolate.
Does the interpolation between them. So that's something that might be worth playing around with. I don't know if you have any familiarity with
certainly
on the Maps API side.
Yeah, the Earth API does have a much smoother animation with some pretty complex interpolation that we do inside of Earth, and it's quite nice. On the Maps API side, that's certainly getting better with the HTML5 version of Street View, looking a lot more smoother sort of between these discrete steps. But yes, it's not a smooth, really, video yet. So I think that's a really good feature request. We've heard it before, to try to make make a smoother animation as you navigate through Street View. And yeah, that's I think.
I think it's not just us. I think all sorts of people could use a way of moving across the landscape, couldn't they?
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple ways that they could be approached, right? One is the one that we've talked about, which is basically moving your virtual camera through a series of panos, right? And there'd be some kind of transition as you move from one to the next to the next. The other one would be some kind of offline rendering of a video for a given sequence, which would obviously involve a different set of infrastructure on our side, where we'd actually try to you'd have to sort of create that video on demand and then be able to play it back. That would be pretty cool, though.
That's a very cool idea.
I mean, for instance, we could do that ourselves. We could take a section of the road and put that together as a little video and have it on. But you guys don't like us taking the stuff on board, do you? Having it on our side. I know, it's the nature of Google.
Yeah, so definitely our terms don't allow you to do offline analysis on the Street View imagery. Also, another pretty common feature request, though. So it's not that we ignore them. We definitely feature requests and try to see if we can build a service that would do the things that are needed. But case in point noted, and I think there's actually open feature requests for that on the Maps API issue tracker. And if you go there and you star those, the more developers that star those things, the more they kind of pop up on our radar every time we have a meeting and say, what should we do next to make this a better developer experience. The more people clamor for something, the more likely it is to happen. So that is really good feedback.
Following off that, how many stars do you need for something to really figure? I mean, do you need like 20 stars or?
Definitely more than one. Unless it's a really good point on that one.
Well, there's also obviously a trade-off between, there's a full spectrum of different type of feature requests, right? There's things that are basically just a bug that we haven't gotten to yet that might be fairly straightforward to fix. There are things that we may already have been working on, and it's just a matter of like, okay, well, now it's ready. There might be things that are we hadn't thought of before, but actually are fairly easy for us to do. And then there are things that may be great ideas, but they're also involve a pretty significant amount of work. And in those cases, those things take longer, or we might, may or may not get to them. So unfortunately, there's not like a straightforward answer.
Engineering effort. But if you look, for example, just today, I think we put out a blog post on the GeoDeveloper blog about a bunch of new features in our Places API, and all of those features, I can assure you, were driven entirely by user requests on the issue tracker, and we looked at the top requests and we implemented those for the Places API. So this happens all the time. We definitely look at that. It's a great way to give us feedback about what's important to you guys.
Yeah, and it keeps us from going off and spending time doing stuff that you guys don't care about.
Yeah, but at the same time, there are ones that would require disproportionate effort, or for various other reasons we just can't do, and then even the large number of stars might not get you what you're looking for. We try to give you feedback when that's going to happen, though.
Okay.
Okay, great.
Should we jump on the
let's hop into some moderator questions, and then we'll come back here for a quick last question or two if there are any. I'm just going to go ahead and call the participants. And I'll share the screen here so we can all see these moderator questions. Yep, there we go. Okay. Wow, that was pretty cool. Okay, so let's go to the top question. What is Google's plan with Google Earth Desktop and plugin? With SketchUp being sold and a growing aversion to plugins, I cannot help but wonder if it is the end of Google Earth. Is that in sight?
Absolutely not. So basically, plugins are the worst solution ever, except for all the others, right? I mean, I think plugins are something that are really a means to an end, and I hate plugins as well. And I think the real question is, given what we're trying to do and all the functionality with this sort of high frame rate 3D graphics, what's the best way to bring that to developers on the web, right? And that answer has been and continues to be using our plugin to provide that capability. Now, obviously, there's some really exciting stuff going on in the web world now. There's a lot of things with, JavaScript's getting faster and faster all the time. There's like worker threads. WebGL is showing a lot of great promise with our Maps.gl. I think it is sort of an indication of our commitment to that technology and our commitment to really push the limits of the web as a platform. So we're absolutely looking at ways to, further bring together an immersive 3D environment and the web, right? And it's hard to know how that's going to play out and when it's going to play out. Obviously, we're very interested in WebGL. We're looking at it, but today it really takes the plugin to provide the full breadth of functionality that we want to have. But overall, we're very committed to mapping out the world and providing this sort of virtual 3D experience, right? And
Yep.
I think over the years, what that means in terms of technology is going to evolve and change, right? I mean, 5 years ago, we wouldn't have thought about mobile devices as even being a factor, right? And yet here we are. Mobile's a critical part of our products, our stories, our developers. Everyone wants to know how mobile's going to play into it. What are things going to look like 5 years from now? I don't know yet, but we're committed to really creating the best experience we can on whatever platforms our users are on.
You don't know what's going to happen in 5 years?
Well, I do. I just can't say it.
Okay. Right, we can't share that information today. So let's hop back up to this next window. It's just coming into focus. How are applications chosen or considered for the developer showcase?
Josh.
Yes. So we have our new sort of developer channel at developers.google.com, and one of the things there is a pretty nice showcase that includes a whole lot of maps and Earth sort of best-of-breed apps. So how does your app get on there, and how do we choose them? The short answer is it's a curated list. We kind of go over and we look at things that have caught our attention one way or another that we think sort of show off some of the cool capabilities, like a really nice styled map, an amazing tour in Earth, what have you. And then we also sort of pay attention to what people are talking about online on different social networks. And then obviously if you guys have something that you'd like to submit or that you think is great, whether it's your own or somebody else's, you can hit over our Plus page, the sort of Maps API Google Plus page, and let us know about it there. We'll take a look. And we try to sort of refresh the ones that are on there periodically, make sure there's nice new examples that are taking advantage of kind of compelling features so that other developers can come and say, well, I didn't really know you could do that, or that's a great way to do that thing that I used to do.
What about more Earth API examples?
There are so many out there. We have a lot. That's a good point. Okay, I pledge we'll get 1 or 2 up this week. I'll take another look.
All right.
Well, that Planet in Action one you mentioned was amazing. So
yeah. Well, there's a whole bunch of other ones that
we'll take
I'd love to see up there as well. So.
Yeah. So as you can see, it's a very formal process here. But definitely let us know if you have something. We kind of try to curate a list that we think is just going to be compelling for developers to learn something from there. So. Let's hop to this next question. Okay, so rotating ground overlays in Google Maps API, can it be done? So this was a question, I think, by Paul Van Dinther, whom we mentioned earlier, and it was asked also on Stack Overflow. And there's not a comment here. I'll try to add a comment to this moderator later, but we answered that. The short answer is yes, absolutely you can, and posted some, Brendan on our team posted some working code sample that shows you just how to do that. So absolutely you can use canvas rotation, no problem. Next question. Feature request. A sort of set of design patterns, best practices for data viz on the mobile, on the desktop discovery, sort of based on I'm guessing, what our UX and engineers think are the best way to go. I'm not sure if you're bringing that up there. It's a really good question. Going to bring us out of the screen share here. So I think that's a fantastic idea, and we should absolutely do that. I'll let you answer, and then I'll add some more detail there.
Yeah, I mean, I'd love to see that too. I think the thing that sort of is changing this equation as well is the fact that Earth has been a desktop, large screen kind of application for a long time. So I think at least from a KML perspective, people have built some of their own kind of best practices, but we really haven't talked about, like, if you're going to put a legend up, where do you put it on the screen, and a lot of those kind of things. And now with the transition to mobile, things got a lot more complicated, right? You've got to worry about phones, you've got to worry about tablets, you've got to worry about portrait mode and landscape mode, and that really complicates the UI. And we see that ourselves just in the application development, that you can't just, there's not like a one pattern fits all. And it also depends on what type of application. Do you have a, do you really need a legend there? What's the right way to present it?
Absolutely.
I'd love to see that.
Yeah, I mean, generally on Android, it's always good to follow sort of a standard best practices that the average person who uses all kinds of apps on the phone are going to be familiar with. And I know that the Android guys have, I think they call it Android University, a lot of sort of best practices there and examples. You can follow folks like Roman Nurek, who used to actually work a lot with Google Earth over on the Android team, and he's a great designer, and I think he posts some links to a lot of sort of best practices for layout and ways to build your app with that in mind. But more generally, I think it's a great idea. You know, a lot of our examples right now say, here's how you get started, here's the best way to enable, you know, ground overlays or a sidebar or something, but then we don't really take that next step and what's the whole screen space going to look like, what's the whole application going to look like. And yeah, I think we could probably put together some compelling stuff with our UX guys and maybe post a couple of good articles out there. So
yeah, I mean, for Earth API, it'd be good to know like how to handle going, you know, like embedded in a page versus going to a full screen mode and some things to consider about for that as well.
Absolutely, yeah. We've seen a lot of people sort of implement the left-hand panel for the Earth API in different ways. I really like that open source KML tree application. But more generally, yeah, exactly. We could put out some best practices there. I think it's an excellent plan. Where are we here? How much does Google Maps and Earth inform Google Insights?
Is that Insights with a capital I or a lowercase I?
I cannot. Well, this here it's a lowercase, but that could mean anything.
How does it inform Google Insights? Well, I'll just sort of think about it generically. I mean, obviously, location information is a really core part of everything, and I think that you know, Google's a search company, right? And we're all about making information in the world universally accessible and useful, right? Location is a really key part of the world's information, right? If you think about it, everything that has happened somewhere in the world, you know, everything we've ever done has happened somewhere in this world, if you exclude space travel. But you know, so the location component is just such a critical part. You know, we already are working on surfacing local data and other things as part of Google Search itself.
Yep.
And I think that, you know, I kind of think of location as being yet another search term in anything that you might want to do, because if you're, you know, especially for like our Google Maps for mobile, you know, if you're out in the town and you want to know about a bar, for example, you probably want to know about the ones that are walking distance from you. And so this idea of really making sure that location is tied in with the kind of the broader Google experience is something that I think is really important.
Yeah, I agree 100%. And unfortunately, I'm not entirely sure. Are either of you the people who asked that question? Maybe asked for clarification? No. Okay. Well, we'll move to the next question. Hopefully that was the intended question. And the last question we have, when will Google Earth get Google Plus layer to display? And will there be a separate layer to display pictures from Picasa Web and G+? There's, I think, some overlays on top of Earth being requested.
Sure. So I think it's a great idea. I mean, obviously, the key part is to make sure that you have the information and the location. And that's something that, you know, I need to look further into, is to say, you know, and is there a feed available that basically is a location tagged stream of posts? Mm-hmm. But I think that would be, you know, would be fantastic.
Yeah, and I have seen some mashups out there of people who use the public the G+ API to sort of read in check-ins, for example, where those mm-hmm. occurred and so that's certainly the type of thing you could do. Could we make it a little bit more robust, or potentially show you? I mean, certainly with Earth API, you could do it today. But yeah, I think that's an interesting idea. There's a lot of good content being shared out there.
Yeah, I think that's great.
Okay, cool. So I think we're done. Does anyone in the live hangout here have any last-minute questions? Looking good. Okay, well, thanks for joining us, everyone. Really appreciate it. Peter, thank you very much for joining us this week.
My pleasure.
And I think we have another one next week scheduled. We'll post a link to the exact time, probably 1 p.m. Pacific time, or a little early this week. And thanks again.